Thank you!
Hello and welcome, Exiles, to this glorious day where Grasping Vines is finally taking the axe! I hope it kind of just doesn't do anything to our characters now. Grasping Vines is the most infuriating thing ever. But not only is that a great change, we get uber bosses. So there is an even greater reason to push our characters to the next level, to reach that power fantasy, to try to take on even harder content. Then we get Atlas keystones, the things that make it so we can basically reinvent what we want to focus on, way more player agency. This is great for Path of Exile. It makes, the interest of myself to be like, hey, I want to focus on this content. We can now do that, and we can focus on it in even bigger ways. It's really just been a big buff to mapping and endgame in general, and I think it's going to be really a lot of fun. We even got some of the best new uniques I've seen in a long time. Well, okay, Lighties are pretty good. A lot of them are defensively oriented, but my favorite is Steel Mage's unique. This unique offers so much build creation. Basically, there's so many more things you can do because A, you can get keystones you weren't going to be near. That is crazy build enabling. And B, you can get more Atlas passives, specific ones to a certain type of build you're trying to create in areas way far away. This is crazy cool, and I'm excited to build around it. We'll see how rare it is, yada, yada, yada. But those things get me excited. But more exciting to me than all these things, which I think a lot of people are probably going to glance over and not really think about too hard, but I want to try to get you guys to understand why this is so crazy. It's Recombinators. These things represent something beautiful in PoE we get on a regular daily basis, not daily basis, legally basis, which is power creep. These represent taking rare items to the next level in a way we've never really been able to. Well, where we were able to with some abuse cases with Awakened Orbs that people did in Standard and stuff. But this is some crazy power that we're going to be able to do in League. And I want to go over kind of the potential broken cases of how strong these things are. But to start off with, I want to go over an important question that happened in the Q&A between Ziggy and Chris Wilson, where he's basically asking about these items and what they can do for how they combine influences.
Is there any way to connect influences on items together? Say you combine two different influence items together. Can they do the same thing as an Awakened Orb and smush them together?
I'm going to do the dev check on that one to make sure I'm explaining exactly how it works. So
listen to this carefully.
Well, the short answer is no.
Short answer is no.
The long answer.
So short answer, simply put, you cannot take an item with two different influences and then get two different mods from those two different influence pools. It will not work that way. But
answer is it picks the non-influence base type.
Picks the non-influence base type, then you can't get the influence mod.
Okay. So when it's selecting base types...
So pretty simply put, what they're telling us right now is the Recombinator selects one of the bases. It will pick one, and if that base doesn't have the same influence as the influence mod you're trying to get on that item, you can't get that mod, right? But what that tells us is it always is picking one of the two bases, and that base retains its influence, yada, yada, yada. So if you have, for example, a item which is Shaper Elder influenced and an item which is Shaper Elder influenced, and you combine those things, you can still get a Shaper influenced item out of it and retain the special mods of both. So one of the examples I thought of in the abuse case would be if you take something like a multi-link claw, for example. The crafting process just to get the 3 perfect prefixes is hundreds and hundreds of X. It's very expensive to do, but you could, for example, take a claw that has 2 perfect prefixes. You scour off the other affixes, so it's just those 2 influence mods, and then you do a recombinate with a different claw that has 2 different support gems with the possibility of combining them to get 4 support gem mods on a claw. Basically a way of giga jumping into a multi-link claw for the first step of the process. Very expensive craft, but it's just an example of how you can take something where you have really cool mods of specific influences to get even more of those mods together, where originally to get all those, I guess, different special mods with their low tier weightings might be very hard to do. But there are some questions I'm going to have to pose in my head about how these specifically work. And I go over those, which is things we don't know for sure. Are the items always going to be rare? Say we do a recombination thing where it combines a magic item and a magic item. are we going to get a rare item? Say you want to do alt spam for one T1 mod and alt spam for another T1 mod, combine it. Are we guaranteed to get those two mods and then maybe some other special mod? I don't know. My theory is it's probably always going to be rare. Maybe if you combine two magic items, you get a magic item back. I'm not 100% sure. Another question I would have is how many mods will... I typed the same thing twice. How many mods will items roll? Is it always going to be like a Chaos Orb 4 to 6? That would be my theory. Maybe it could potentially be lower, 3 to 6 or something, but it's always going to have a decent amount of mods on it. I think it's going to be like a Chaos Orb where it chooses between 4 mods to 6 mods, and then it's picking from the mod pool of the 2 items you have that you're combining. And then another thing would be, say we have 2 rare items where the example like the claw, where we have 2 support gem prefixes and maybe 2 support gem suffixes, and we've scoured off the prefixes and suffixes respectively. So we have 2 items that each have 2 good mods we want, and we combine them. If it's always going to roll 4 to 6 mods, and it always chooses from the mod pool of the items we have rolled, are we guaranteed to get those 4 mods every single time? This seems way too strong. I don't think it's going to be that powerful, but that's some potential that could be there if it's always guaranteeing to pull from the mod pool of the items we're combining. Something where you want to focus on getting rid of every mod but the couple mods you care about on one item, and then every mod but a couple mods you care about on the other item, and then combining them. Maybe that gives you a very high chance to get a lot of good mods all in one item. Another thing I think that you want to think about is, can you put mods from one base type onto another? And this is actually answered when you go and look at the Astral Plate. You'll notice something interesting here, which is it has fractured global defenses and it has spell suppression. These are both mods that can exist on Grasping Mail. So my theory for how this chess piece was created is you took a Grasping Mail that had spell suppression and it had global defenses, and we can now put mods that couldn't exist on another base onto a different base. So say you have a base you really want to have good special mods on, but it can't roll those mods normally. Like you can't normally roll, for example, spell suppression on an armor base or spell suppression on an ES base. You can now force on mods that couldn't previously exist. That is very powerful in my opinion. You also have the ability to combine for creating impossible items that we couldn't create before. An example I think would be, can we now get double fractured items? Can you combine a fractured global defense Grasping Mail with, I don't know, a fractured +1 Spectre chest, and they get fractured global defense fractured Spectre? Is that a possibility? I think it might be. And then, of course, you have double exclusive mods. Things you couldn't previously do is get a global defense combined with a incursion Guazzoliti life mod. I don't know, there's mods that were exclusively to items you found on the ground, and now that you can combine those mods and transfer them over to other items, the power potential for the special items you can create with this, it goes exponentially high. Because there's certain mods that can just basically carry an item on them on their own. And the examples I think of are things like Global Defense mod, things like the Spectre mod. Those mods are so insane, they kind of carry the chest, and now that you can throw that on and maybe combine it with another mod that carries the chest, you get some really crazy combinations. Next up, some of the crafting, like theory crafting for how this could be really good, is they also showcased us this ring, which has +1 power charge. This is one of the single most powerful possible affixes you can get on a synthesized item. Rings with +1 power charge or +1 frenzy go for 100x plus just the synthesized item, not crafted whatsoever. That mod is definitively one of the most powerful affixes in the game, and that's a possible outcome. Now, my theory is it's going to be a very, very unlikely outcome, borderline non-existent, but you could potentially reliably craft insane items with enough repetition, enough time. And examples I think of for doing that, I don't know where I'm going, but examples I think of for doing that would be, say if you are guaranteed where you just have 2 items where they only have 1 mod each, you could take a ring that has T1 life and combine it with a ring that has T1 wed, for example. Say you're trying to create a T1 life, T1 wed +1 frenzy charge ring. 3 perfect prefixes, which would then allow you to then craft the suffixes after the fact. But this is an example of how you could do that. if you could consistently get these currencies and just throw them at easy to craft rings over time, over the course of a league, you could potentially make some very powerful items. I'm sure the +1 power charge isn't the only Giga Strong mod. Clearly, we have things like keystones, Mage Bane is possible. Things like getting the Flask effect, pretty cool. Alchemist Genius, pretty cool. There's clearly some powerful mods in the mod pool. And it all comes down to how rare is this currency? It says new type of rare currency. Does that mean it's like a Divine Orb? Is it like an Annul Orb? Is it the rarity of an Exalted? Is it more rare? This will define how accessible it is to the common man to create some really powerful items. Because if it's something like a Divine Orb or something relatively farmable, not as common as a Chaos, but you're going to see multiple throughout the league, you can consistently throw these at decent items and create probably some really cool things, but we'll see. How rare is this currency? I don't know. Is it only going to be accessible to the richest players? I hope not. I hope it's very accessible in terms of a reasonable thing to find multiple times throughout the course of a league that you can try to make your own items with, because I think the power for this and what you can do in terms of making your own very cool items for taking your niche build to the next level, I think is awesome. That's just the borderline of why I'm so excited about these new currencies. They give us crazy new power for unique items. I say unique, but they're rare items, but they're unique in how many cool affixes they can have that do special things that are kind of build defining. And other examples of basically, pinnacle crafting would be taking exclusive mods like the Spectre mod, like the Global Defense mod, and then trying to craft on a specific influence mod and then recombine those mods where they have influence mod plus special exclusive mod, influence mod plus special exclusive mod, and combine them together to get basically 4 really good mods type of thing. Stuff like that is going to be on the books for crazy next level items, and it's going to push the level of gear way through the roof. So that's some of my thought process and why I think these recombinators, I don't know how to say the word, but that's why I think these are so cool, and there's going to be so much new power potential and power creep, and how much farther we can take our characters. I'm going to be excited to see. Really crossing my fingers. Please let this currency not be insanely unattainable in terms of rarity. Let it be somewhat common to drop, that the common man and an everyday player can feel comfortable to throw it at and craft their own cool currency, because crafting, I think, is one of the funnest things you can do in this game in terms of basically satisfaction level of upgrading and progressing your character. When you can make your own gear and it's accessible to do so, I think it's really, kind of a fun experience. So hopefully this currency isn't too rare, and then we're going to be able to create some really cool items in League. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Take care, Exiles. Peace out.
And we're ignoring the fact that Diablo Immortal comes out in a few weeks, by the way, guys. That's not a game. We're going to play Path of Exile.